morning, I woke up on the almost island of Nahant, Massachusetts, looking at the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. And I wondered for a moment about the 1.85 billion children who live on this earth. And I wondered, they are our greatest resource, in part because they are the greatest questioners on the face of the earth. A few years ago, I was in China. And I was eating dinner actually with this family, and this small girl was playing with her grandfather. And I could tell from the moment they were together, they loved each other. And if you look at this picture of them, you can see the love in his eyes for her. You can feel it in the touch they have in their hands to each other. And I could see that she had at least one adult in her life who deeply cared about who she was, about the things she was saying, about the questions she was asking. Then, a few years ago, not a few years ago, it was just last year actually, I was taking pictures of my granddaughter, who was about a few years younger than that girl in China. But basically, her name is Stella. She was looking up at me as I was taking her picture. And her eyes reminded me of that little girl's eyes in China. And the eyes are asking questions of me as an adult. What do you expect of me? Are you listening to me? Do you care about me? Can I trust you? And I can't say anything is more important than this, and that is we have to, as adults, create an environment of trust for these little children to be able to ask questions, not only when they're 3 and 4 years old, but when they're 14 years old and 24 years old and 44 years old. So the point is the following. These little children grow up, they're full of questions. No matter where I go in the world, no matter where you go in the world, they ask 1,000 questions. And when they go into school systems, sometimes it disappears, but before then, they question everything. Now that's important. If there's one gift I could give to any child in the world is to remember that phrase, question everything. And the reason why is because when Clayton Christensen, who authored the Innovators DNA, and Jeff Dyer with me, when we interviewed people like Jeff Bezos at Amazon, the founder of Amazon, or Nicholas Zenstrom, who founded Skype, or Pierre Omidyar, who founded eBay, all of them basically questioned the world. And this is the way in which they were able to disrupt and change the world. And interestingly, they all had some adult in their life when they were younger who paid attention to their questions. For Jeff Bezos, it was grandparents. Every summer, when he lived on their farm in Texas, he would learn how to ask the right questions to fix problems on the farm. You had Orit Gadish, who's the chairman, is really a woman, but the chairman of Bain Consulting Group. She had parents who valued, treasured her questions, and every day they were asking her about the questions she was asking. And when she was a teenager, one of her teachers wrote in her yearbook, Orit always asked those 2 or 3 questions, because whenever a teacher would raise her hand and say, does anybody have a question? Whose hand would go up? Orit's would all the time go up, and she'd always have 2 or 3 questions, and she always asked them. And the story goes on and on and on that innovators who change the world ask questions that disrupt the world. The challenge is when these young kids, if they don't have deep support around them that creates trust for their questions to thrive and survive, the challenge is they go into a school setting where the rule of 1 rules. And here's what I mean. If I were a teacher in school, here's what I might ask. What is 2 plus 2? 4. Now, there was 1 second between the question and my answer. And the data from the 1940s to the 1970s to the 1990s to today would say that the average teacher waits 1 second after they ask a question before they get an answer. And if they don't get an answer, what does the teacher do? They fill the space with another question. And if they do, the average response time for the second question is about 1/2 of a second. It's as if they're machine gunning children with questions to just get the answers they want to hear. But if adults, either parents or teachers, step back and ask a different question like, why is 2 plus 2 4? And they wait on average 3 seconds like I just did, children, young and old, give better responses, more thoughtful responses. And so one of the greatest gifts we can give to the people around us is the space and time to ask and answer questions. And that's part of why I've been working with colleagues around the world trying to launch the 424 project. Here's the deal, is that how could we spend 4 minutes every 24 hours to either listen to questions better or to ask more questions? The other one at school is that the average student in high school at school, in an average sort of classroom, asks one question per month that's content related, that's not a question like what's going to be on the test, but why is there air? It's a more substantive question. Those sorts of things happen once a month. It's like they're question brain dead. And mostly it's not their fault. It's because adults aren't listening, and frankly, adults aren't asking very good questions themselves. So, if I want to get out of that as a 4-year-old or a 24-year-old or a 44-year-old or a 64-year-old or even an 84-year-old, here's my suggestion. Today, spend 4 minutes paying attention to the questions that matter, your own or someone else's. Because when a 4-year-old asks a question over and over and over again, do you know why they're saying it again, repeating the question? It's because from their frame of mind, they don't think you heard them. They don't think you understood them. And as soon as they finally get it, she understands me, they'll stop asking the question. That's the point. So it might be spending 4 minutes listening to somebody's questions, really listening. Mark Benioff founded a company called Salesforce.com. I asked Mark recently, how do you figure out to ask the right question in situations? He gave me a one-word answer: listen. More than your ears, listen with your heart. Because when you do, you really hear. And when you hear, you'll be able to formulate the right question to unlock a solution that nobody else has for a situation. That's the key, listening to questions and asking questions. I suspect everyone in this room has at least one problem, personal or professional, for which you don't have a solution. Am I right? Something. Take that problem today, get out your iPad, your smartphone, or an old piece of paper and pencil, and write down nothing but questions about that problem for the next 4 minutes. Spend 4 minutes today, for just 4 minutes. And I'll be surprised if you do that 1, 2, 3, or 4 days, when you're writing those questions down, they're up there, but you and I don't see the patterns in our questions. And when we put them on paper, we start seeing what we're asking. And when we start seeing what we're asking, we start realizing they're the wrong questions. Peter Drucker, a great leadership guru, once said, there's nothing more dangerous than the right answer to the wrong question. And it's a simple practice. It sounds so simple, you may not even try to do it. But if you do, I've done it for the last year or so, 4 minutes a day. It literally opens up solutions that weren't there before. And so that's my suggestion. I've got a grandson, we have 6 grandchildren, a grandson named Cash. This is an image of his foot just after he was born. And to me, it's a powerful image of every child either on this earth or coming to this earth. They come with questions, preloaded. They're full of them. That's why their brains are so active and alive. And even though a baby can't verbalize a question, they are asking questions. We don't need words. They're trying to explore and understand. And once they start asking the questions, they explode with them. And as adults, one of our greatest gifts we can give to them is to listen and hear and engage and explore and be in their place. Because when we do that, those Cashes and any other grandchild in the world is going to grow up, and they will know that one of the greatest gifts they can have as they go into a world that will undoubtedly be far more provocative, far more difficult, far more perplexing than the one we live in. They will have a tool of asking the right questions in a right situation that will keep their world alive and help us make the world better. Thank you.